Learn Persian with Chai and Conversation. Growing Up Irani interview with Samira Mohieddin. So, Samira Mohieddin, thank you so much for talking with me today.
The pleasure.
We're right across the border from each other right now, so very close by. I first want to say I've been a big fan of your work. So I really appreciate everything that you do, your tone, the things that you bring into the conversation. I want to thank you this past few months, especially. It's been really important to see. Like, sorry. I just want to get it out of the way. It's
I
been
know,
wonderful to
I get
see.
embarrassed. That's why it's weird for me too because a lot of people have been saying this to me, but it's just strange for me to hear because uh, I don't know. Maybe I'm not good with compliments.
Well, that and also because you've been doing this consistent, like good work for so long. And I feel like probably for you, it's very strange all of a sudden.
Yes,
Uh,
that's exactly what
yes,
it is. Yes, because
that's,
even if just in terms of sort of, let's just keep it at Instagram. I was a person who had, let's say, I don't know, I think I was like 6,000 followers, somewhere around there. And then to all of a sudden, get tens of thousands of more followers was very odd, right? I mean,
yes,
that for me was an anthropological study in and of itself. Um,
right.
yeah, it was very,
Exactly. And, I've been in New York and I just told you before the screen, I've been, spending a lot of time with Ariane Moayed and hearing about his project, Water. Well, one thing that he said that really stood out to me is he said, he's had this for 20 years now and just been doing this slow work. And
yeah.
all of a sudden, with the George Floyd protest, that blew up and he was like, where have you all been? And I've seen you say that a lot. Like, where have you all been? Like, now you're with me. So I really appreciate it. And I want to get to that in a bit about what you've been saying for a long time and how you continue to do this work. But first, I want to go back and talk a little bit about your history. So you were born in Iran and you moved to Canada when you were, I believe, 2 years old. 4 years old. Okay. Can you kind of tell us about that?
Sure. I was born in Tehran, and I guess any schooling I did there didn't go past nursery. Went to a French school there, like a French nursery, and then we moved to Canada on May 4th, 1979. So the day that the government fell, January 16th, 1979, when the Shah left, was the day that the Canadian government called us to come for the interview. So my parents went to the Canadian embassy on that same day, and they were told they had 6 months to leave. That's how, like the visa time, the immigration visa, you had 6 months between that day, and they were accepted on that same day. And we landed May 4th, 1979, in Canada, and we moved to Quebec. We didn't move to Toronto at first because my aunt had a farm out there, like a big industrial farm, cows, baling hay, tapping maple syrup trees. It was all very Canadiana. So yeah, that's how we got to Canada.
And it wasn't with an intention to leave, it was through your
No, no,
aunt's.
no. The intention was we'll leave for a little bit and then we will come back. There was no, let's look for work now. Like my parents like really thought we'll just be here until things die down and then we're going to go back. We're not immigrating to this country, you know.
Okay, so you come with the intention to just be there for a few months, and then what happens?
Yeah, I mean, after a while, and my grandmother had come too, right? So it was a big, and so after about a year, you have to understand, my aunt lived in a town of 500 people. So my parents came from a city of 8 million to now a town of 500. And I remember my mom's thyroid was like out to here. She was not doing well. And she said, it doesn't look like things are changing, So my parents moved to Toronto, which is a sort of bigger city. Nothing like Tehran, but bigger than where they were. And then we signed up for school. We started going to school, and there were probably, I would say, a handful of Iranian families here at that time. And my mom, just because of the person she is, she started to get involved in bringing all of these sort of families together. They formed a group called Anjomana Ferdowsi, and
Mm.
they started throwing New Year parties, things like that. I started going to Saturday school, Persian school. My sister and I went to Persian school, Saturday school, and so this was sort of their way of keeping, things alive, their culture
Was
alive.
your brother born in Iran as well, or was he
No, my
born in?
brother was born here in 1981. So
Okay. So
years.
then what was the in the house? Did y'all speak Persian together, or how was that?
So I'll backtrack because in Quebec, my parents started going to French school. Something that the Quebec government wants you to do. So there was this weird mix in the house of like, because my sister was going to French school in Iran. She went to Institut Mariem, and so when she went to French school in Quebec, it was sort of natural for her. It was no problem. So that at first, when we moved to Toronto, there was this weird mishmash in the house of like French, English, Persian. Uh, I didn't speak English, so I went to ESL. So did my sister. So we did a couple of years of ESL. So in the house, it was mainly Persian, and then at the same time, my parents were trying to learn English, right? So everybody was going through their own sort of lingual like mind fuck. Oh,
It's okay.
you swear on
We
this stuff,
Yes, yeah, we're
that out.
not safe for work podcast.
Yeah, but we were all going through our own language, journey.
What about your within you and your siblings? What were you speaking to in one another?
Oh, it was Persian. It was Persian.
Okay, you
Yeah. Until we started really learning English, right? Because you have to understand we didn't speak English. So, but my brother went to French again. My brother was in French immersion school, so it was again this weird mishmash. But no one ever had gotten to the point where we were like mastering French. You know, my sister spoke it better than anyone else. And I should probably say for people who don't know, Canada is a bilingual country, French and English. And so my brother was in French school. My parents were trying to learn English. I was in ESL, also in ESL. But there was never in the house, my parents never said, "فقط فارسی حرف میزنیم." They're like, they only speak Persian in the house. That wasn't a rule at all. Yeah. Because I know in some families it was like, okay, outside you speak this, inside
right.
you're going to speak Persian.
Well, because it sounds like it wasn't a clear decision. It wasn't like we're staying here and so we have to keep our Persian roots. It wasn't like nobody knew what was going on, right? Everyone was just trying to survive and like get through.
It took about 2 years until we noticed, oh, my parents are selling things. Then
Wow.
things started to change. And then
Right,
my
right.
grandmother died, which was really brutal, um, because at that point they had already closed the borders. The Iran-Iraq war started, so it
Wow.
wasn't so easy to come and go anymore.
Right, right.
Shut the airports.
So then as the years went on, you said you had the Nowruz, like you started to build this community there and you learned to read and write.
Yeah, I mean, Persian school on Saturdays were really a place to eat salad olivier and like, have fun with my cousins. It had gotten to the point where I kept failing, because I was such a class rabble rouser. And during the week, you were going to English, you were learning English, and you were in these English schools. And then on Saturdays, the Persian teachers were very different. They were very strict, and we were
Ah.
kind of like, piss off. Like, we're not going to listen to this stuff. So I had like four male cousins. We were all in the same classes, and we just kept failing classes. And it had gotten to the point where, I was 12 years old, and everyone else in the class was like 6 years old. I was still doing, at 12 years old, I was still doing Baba Abdad, Maman, you know. So at one point, I finally got kicked out of Persian school, and I'll never forget the moment. I was 12, and I had a bob haircut. I don't know if you know, but it's like your hair is like this, and it was like covering half of my eye. And I was in class one day, and the teacher said to me, And I'll say this in Persian. She said, "Man muatu dus nadaram, muatu durust," as Bikesh kenan, or something like that. And I
So
said,
I don't like your hair. Pull it aside.
yeah, she said, I don't like the way your hair is. And I said to her, "Boro moai khodato durust kon, ba'dan bia ba man harf." So I said, "Go fix your own hair and then come and talk to me." And that was just like the last straw for her. She was like, "Get out." And I was like, "Fine." And I really, I mean, looking back on it, right, I regret all of my behavior in Persian school because I'm not at the point now where it's on par with English, right? I can read and write, and I can speak the language, but if you ask me to say a word like eloquent, I can't say that in Persian. Or if you ask me to say a word like, I don't know, ubiquitous, I can't say that in Persian, right? So there are words that I can't use, and I'm not as proficient. Uh, so I regret that. But then I ended up taking it in university.
Okay. Well, what was your relationship with being Iranian growing up? I mean, there's a lot of differences with Canada and the US, so I'm not exactly sure, but was it embarrassing? Was it something you were proud of? Was it something, how was it in school?
It has like these ups and downs, right? And it was always tied to whatever the government was doing. That was how we were treated, right? So one of the biggest things, and I've written about this, was when the hostage crisis happened. So when the students of the Imam's line, so these Islamic revolutionary students, took 52 Americans hostage um, on November 4th, 1979. That was something that I'll never forget because my cousins, my sister, and I were coming back from school. And again, keep in mind, at this point, I'm 5 years old. My sister is 9. My cousins were like 10 and 11. We were actually taken hostage and we were tied up to the back of our apartment building to the trees there. These boys tied us up
Oh,
and said, "You took them hostage, so we're going to take you hostage."
wow.
Yeah, it was really, I remember crying and screaming and saying, "We
Oh,
didn't do anything." But again, we didn't speak English, so my sister was yelling at them in French, saying it wasn't us, and it was so jarring. I always go back to this moment of thinking, we really make the citizens of a country pay for the crimes of their government. You know, Here we were, 10,000 kilometers away, right? Being treated like utter garbage because these assholes back in Iran did that. So it's not just that you can remove yourself from a country. People don't, it doesn't work that way. And then again in 2001, when 9/11 happened, even though Iran and Iranians had nothing to do with it, right? The moment I tried to enter the US, my retina was scanned, I had my fingerprints taken. Like, that wasn't the norm before, right? So here we were again paying for what someone else did when it had nothing, literally had nothing to do with us.
I didn't realize it was like that in Canada too. I could understand in the US because
Yeah.
the hostage crisis didn't even have to do with Canada.
No, it didn't, but it was all over the papers, and you know, um, it really left a mark on me.
Of course.
An
Yeah, that's
indelible mark of thinking, wow, it doesn't matter how I see myself or what I do. The government and its actions do have an influence on how people see me. So it's not just something that you immigrate and you're done with it. It doesn't work that way.
right. So that happened at 5. And then how was it as you were growing up? Was it still that feeling of fear like in high school where you
Oh no, not at all. No, high school, no, not at all. There was no friction, no anything like that. People knew I was Iranian. I didn't hide it.
okay. And it
None.
was very like diverse in Canada, right? I mean, I remember I mean, they call Toronto Tehran to now. There's so many Iranians and I feel like Iranians are very well respected there.
They are. I mean, it, again, it has these sort of ebbs and flows, highs and lows, because in 1989, for instance, when the Iran-Iraq war ended, there was this huge influx of Iranians into Toronto. So the immigration waves into the city was like 1979, 1989. 2000, 2009, and then, whatever we are now. But in 1989, when the war ended, there was this huge influx of Iranians into the high school, and I remember the guidance counselor saying, "Okay, we have all these Iranians coming. Can you help us sort of help them navigate? Blah blah blah." And I was like, "Sure, no problem." And I had such a difficult time, uh, sort of meeting them, even though we're both Iranian. It was such a culture clash because they were coming from a place that I hadn't been to in a decade and had only been to when I was 4, and here I was now at 15 or whatever. And I wasn't very helpful to them, because they were also looking at me like, "Are you Iranian?" Like, what before we would start talking, I would hear them say in Persian when would walk down the halls, "In Iraniya, in Iraniya." They were sort of like really amazed that I was Iranian. Like either I didn't look Iranian to them or didn't be act Iranian. I don't know. I would hear all this stuff in my ears, and then something happened that. Um, I mean, I'm assuming this show is a little bit PG, but they started like there were a lot of Iranians who were troublemakers who had just arrived, and like Chahukesh Budan, like they would bring knives to school. There was a lot of gangs had come together to form, and I guess it was really just trying to protect themselves or have some sort of unity. I don't know, but they were a lot of troublemakers who had just arrived, and they had spray painted on the wall of the high school this big, I'm talking big, like 20 feet letters, And I remember coming home from school and I said to my mom, "What does this word mean?" Because I could read, remember, I could read, but my comprehension of what I was reading wasn't always, it's kind of like Arabic. You can read it, but you don't know what you're reading. So I came home and I remember saying to my mom, "What does this word mean?" She was like, "Oh my God, who said that? Where did you see that?" And I was like, "Oh, it was spray painted on the wall of the high school." She was like, "Oh, these newcomers, oh, they're embarrassing. They're, blah, 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 blah." And the word, you could bleep this out, but it was kir, which means dick in Persian, but a very rude way of saying it, right? So, I was like, "Oh, wow. You know, why are they spray painting this on the side of the wall?" But it was, I guess, like, I don't know, they liked it. It was some form of graffiti. But like again, this was my introduction to this new group of Iranians who had come. Right? Uh, they weren't the people that had come in 1979. Like
Right.
clear differences between between us. So it was sort of hard to navigate these new relationships that you were trying to forge and try to help these people because at the same time my mom was going to these shelters because they were mostly refugees, and she was bringing home refugees to live with us,
Mm.
like literally live with us. All of a sudden, there was a family of 4, like living with us in the basement. We didn't have a very big home; it was just a townhouse. So, and this would happen every couple of years. My mom would help them get on their feet. She would like co-sign rent places for them to go and live.
Wow.
And then every couple of years, a new family would come. And it was funny because you'd walk down the street in what was sort of becoming Tehran, and people would like stop my mom and say, "Look, it's my daughter. She's now in whatever elementary school. Blah blah blah. Thank you so much." And as a kid, I'm like, "What's going on here?" I didn't know like I knew people were coming to live with us and like she was helping them, but the impact that she was having on the community at that time,
Right.
I couldn't really fathom it until I got older.
How did you start to develop your like political understanding of what was happening in Iran? Like when did you start to, cuz you have a very strong voice in that regard now.
We knew from a very young age why we immigrated. Like my parents didn't shield that from us, right? And if you were a kid like 5 or my sister was 9, I mean you saw the upheaval. Like my sister remembers going to the airport and seeing somebody hanging from a tree
Oh,
on our way to Mehrabad, right? And there was like as you got in the airport, you knew that there was upheaval. people would kick our luggage and say, "Get out!" Like there was a lot of that going on. So we were very aware, and my parents were very political people. Um, Not that they belonged to political parties, but they were very instilled a sort of understanding of social justice and equality in us from a very, very young age. Like these were conversations that we were having around the dinner table. They weren't asking us about, how was your homework? Like, I would watch my parents glued to the news every night, right? So when we, for instance, got tied up in the back of the apartment, my mom sat us down and told us why, right? And
Wow.
then we would see on the news, like she was saying, this is what they've done, blah blah blah. So I grew up with that. My mom sort of told me about Mahnaz Afghani, the first minister of women's affairs in Iran, put on a death list at a young age. I had that photo in my room since I was 9 or 10 years old. So these were people and figures and things that I grew up with. So as I got older and like decided to sort of make this my area of study, these were people and things that I already knew about, but then sort of went down a rabbit hole. And then went on to do a master's in blah blah blah. So it sort of felt very
Wait, a master's in what? What was the?
Oh, I have a master's in modern Middle Eastern history and gender.
Okay,
So,
right, right.
so that just made a lot of sense. Like this was the trajectory that I was going down.
And then what was your relationship? How many times have you visited Iran and how old were you during those trips? Were you with your parents or what was your?
No, my mom has never been back. She
Wow, okay.
has no desire to go back, not under this government. The first time I went back, so we left in 1979. The first time I went back was in 1999. I landed in Tehran on my birthday, August 8th. And it was the couple. It was a month after Hijdayetir, so the big student protest that happened in 1999, where there was a huge government crackdown, and I landed in Tehran a month after, and this was the same time that it was the last solar eclipse of the millennium.
Ooh,
So the year 2000 was just coming up, right? And everybody was going, all the scientists around the world were going to Tehran to see this solar eclipse because Iran was one of the best places in the world to watch it, where you could
wow,
see
okay.
it really, really well. And so I remember going to Esfahan on that day. It was August 11th, 1999. And what is it called? Nakhsha Jahan, like that square.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
I
Yes.
forget what it's called now.
Naqshband Jahan, that sounds
Yeah.
right.
And there were hundreds of people in the square, and we were all wearing those 3D glasses,
Uh-huh.
that you pass out because they tell you not to look at a solar eclipse, right? It could
Right.
ruin your eyesight. And I remember everybody was in the square. The lights, like it just got dark, right? All of a sudden because of the solar eclipse, everybody was standing around with these glasses, like trying to look up. And yeah, that was my sort of introduction. And I remember being on the plane, and it was a KLM flight, and they said you are now in Iranian airspace, and everybody had to cover their hair.
Right.
Nobody. I think there was maybe two or three people on that plane who had covered up, and I was like, whoa, now we have to cover, even though we were on this flight because we were in Iranian airspace. We all covered, and I got off the plane and I started filming like right on the tarmac. And the first thing you see was this gun, like this AK, not like M16, just being like, it was another, and he like just hit the corner of my VHS. Back then we had those high 8 cameras. Remember those big things?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So that was my first film. Was boom. It was in the city. I was like, okay, like we're not in Kansas anymore, you know. And I just remember the smell of
Yeah. I was gonna ask.
winds hitting my nose
Yeah.
and the hot air. Uh, it was unbearable, the heat.
Yeah. And did you have family there? Like who was there
Yeah,
at the
so I
airport?
had my grandmother was there at the time.
Okay.
She had gone to visit, and then I had like second cousins, third cousins. I had one uncle there still in Esfahan, and
Okay.
that's it. So I remember that he had to bring, like, there was no Imam Khomeini airport at this point. It was just all international flights would go in and out of Mehraban. And he had Sanad Khunado, he had to bring it because I did not go to Iran with a passport. I went with what's
Wow.
called a Barg Ubur, which in French is called a Pas-Élysées. So it's basically a travel document. So the
Okay.
embassy gave me a travel document in Canada to then go to Iran and get a passport while I was there. So I was there for close to 2 months.
And why did you go?
It was actually, I went to film, to do some filming. It was for a film I was working on for the creative development of a film called Passing. We were writing a film about women who would dress up as men or pass in order to be able to do things like swim or, run in the streets or like do just basic things, right?
Right.
And so we were going to do some filming and to also talk to female artists who were working there, to ask them what it was like as a female artist living in Iran. One of the people that we interviewed, I'm not sure if you know Patty Saburi, he's like a
Mm-mm.
really famous theater director there. And then another gentleman that we interviewed was a really famous film director who passed away. He made a film about this woman who set herself on fire,
Mm-hmm.
but it was like a narrative film. God, I can't remember his name. It starts with a K.
We'll look it up. We'll put it in the show notes.
I have to find his name. But yeah, so that was one of the other people that we went to talk to. And then another woman that we spoke to was this Hungarian artist, uh, like Majorestani, who had lived in Iran since like even before the revolution. She had moved there and stayed there. She was married to that man, the Iranian film director. She was prolific artist, like a painter. Again, I forget her name, but that was the reason for going, right? And then also, I had never been, right? I had, and my memories were so murky. I mean, I was only 4 when I left. But I can tell you, like, to summarize the trip, it was very traumatic for me. It was not. I did not have a good time at all. I lost 12 pounds while I was there, and would cry at least once a day. At least once a day. It was a very sad
Why?
place.
What was going on? What was the vibe there? You were in Esfahan. What? First, give me a little context.
I was in Esfahan only for a week.
Okay.
Um, Tehran
And what
is.
was the political contest? Who was the president at the
It
time?
was Khatami.
Oh, it was Khatami.
So
Okay, so then
Khatami was.
where was the hijab at the time? Was it here? Was it here?
It was sort of like, this was the time where like people would wear hijabs. But they had like big bouffants, so it was kind of like,
Yes. Okay.
you know. Um, but I just found Tehran a very tragically sad place. And it was all these reminders. So remember, I had to get my passport while I was there. So I was going through a lot of bureaucracy, things that normally someone who's visiting wouldn't have to endure, right? So one of the places that I had to go to on a daily basis for a week was the passport office. And so, as you know, there is a women's section and the men's section. And so the women's section was on top, the men's section was on the bottom, and it was very hot. It was August. It was normally 38 to 40 degrees every day. And when you entered the women's section of the passport office, there was, like every other women's section, a piece of cloth put up in front of the door. So I'm not sure if you know this, but in the Quran, this is why this happens in Iran. But in the Quran, ye parche bud, separating Muhammad's wives from everyone else who would come to visit the home. And so that's why there is a cloth put up at
I
women's
did not know
entrances.
this. Okay.
Yeah. So you would pass through this cloth, and there yedunas qahara, like the women, the hijabi, very hijabi sort of.
Khahara, literally sisters. Yeah.
One of the sisters of whatever Zainab were there, and on a desk in front of her was pambe, so cotton balls, acetone, which is acetone, And then, yeah, so there was that. And so when you enter, they would pat you down, right? And then they would say, Matika to bema, like take off your lipstick. So they would give you a cotton ball, you'd take your lipstick off, blah, blah. All of this stuff, it had gotten to the point where after the fourth day, I said to her, look, you have cotton balls and acetone and like nail polish remover and all this stuff here, but you don't have a single goddamn piece of paper telling me what I actually need to get the passport. Like priorities of these of places were so skewed. I just couldn't handle it. So I would make my way upstairs after being told. Actually, one day I was told, "Go home. You're not wearing socks." So I had to trek back to the apartment, to get my dogs. So all of this was extremely frustrating. So I get upstairs and they're like, you need your passport photo. So I was like, okay. And they're like, you have to go to this place to get them. And then you have to go to the bank to get it stamped. Then you have to go to the Kalantari, which is like the sheriff's office, and get this stamp. So this doesn't all just happen in one day, right?
No.
Go to get my photo taken. I take my photo, I take it back to the passport office, and they say, "Oh no, 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 your ears are showing." So can't show your ears because look how attractive my ears are. You never know
Right.
who that's going to arouse. So back to the photo guy, and I say, "My ears are showing." So he takes a photo where it's just like literally this. I go back to them. I give them the photo. They're like, great, this passes muster. Then I go to the office of the Kalantari, who needs to see ID from me, right? I can't just take him that photo. So what's my ID? It's the Shah and Shah passport. That's all I have.
Like from when you were 4.
Exactly. With a photo of me, my mom, and my sister. So that's what I take. So of course he's like, the devil has come to see him. And he looks at me and he says, "تو اصلا چرا آمدی اینجا?" Like, why have you even come here? Right? And I said, "من آمدم کسوف ببینم," which means I've come to see the eclipse, right? And he says, مردم تو این مملکت پول ندارن تخم مرغ بخورن تو آمدی کسوف ببینی, which means people in this country don't even have money to buy eggs, but you've come to see the eclipse. So basically he's like shaming me, right? Like trying to take some. And I looked at him and I said, I'm not the one stealing the people's money.
Wow.
I was a little unhinged. So I was not in any way holding back myself in Europe. When these types of people would talk to me, I would chirp right back at them. And I have to tell you, they really don't expect it, and they don't know how to treat you. I have to say, I was either very lucky and very stupid, and I think they thought I was just a little crazy. So they were like, look, because
Just go.
I at one point had gotten so annoyed in the passport office because one day the air conditioners were not working in the women's section. So I took off my veil. Remember, it's the women's section. So I was like, there's no men here. Why do I have to wear this? Like, so I took it off and I put it around my neck. And this woman came up to me, and I'll never forget this. You will not believe this, Layla, but you're standing in line and all you hear in your ear, you don't see a person. You just hear in your ear, خیانت کن به خدا که خدا به تو خیانت کنه. And I fucking I turned around and it was one of these women, right, who has the chador on and she's got half of it in her mouth. And I looked at her and I said, اون کثافت رو از دهنت بیار بیرون, من نمیفهمم تو چی میگی. She didn't say anything to me. She just turned around, right? And
wow, yeah.
I stood on top of the chair in the passport office and I said, read into mamlakat اما حجاب همه ما رعایت. And like some ladies started cheering, others were
well, I
like,
have to translate that. So you said you basically you shit on this country, but but all of our hijab looks good. Is right.
We're all properly veiled.
We're
right?
all properly veiled.
You shit
Yeah.
on the country. You shit into the country. The country, actually, I think the translation would be the country's gone to shit, but
Yes.
we're all properly veiled. And so some women started clapping, others whatever. And I knew, okay, my day at the passport office ends now. So then I went off. Like this ordeal at the passport office took more than 3 weeks of coming and going, coming and going.
And you're 20 at this point, right? You're 20 and you're doing this.
And in Iran, lineups don't get long; they get wide.
Yeah.
They're like people just cannot figure out. And I'm coming from a place like Canada where everybody's very prim and proper. You do not butt in front of people. You do not cut in a line. Lines don't get longer. People line up. You take a ticket. You know, none of this was happening in Iran. Maybe it is now, but none of that was happening in
Right.
1990.
There's not systems. It's all just bureaucratic like mess.
It's a mess. It's an
Yeah.
absolute mess. And again, I wasn't used to, the Iran that my parents were described was not the Iran that I was met with when I got to Tehran in 1999. So, seeing, 6, 7, 8 year olds working on the streets was not something that I was used to. So I cried, you know, I found it extremely disturbing. I was constantly just, whatever money was in my pocket was gone after an hour.
Right. So you didn't have this feeling of like homecoming, like you said, that smell. For me, I feel like when I get that smell of fumes, I'm like home. And sometimes I'll smell it in like a city. I feel this, but you didn't have that feeling of like home.
No, no, no. I found it to be a very dark, dangerous, because everything that I encountered, like another story was I was in a restaurant with my friends, with my cousins, laughing out loud. The waiter comes over and says, "You can't laugh out loud."
Wow. And why? Why did the waiter say that?
Because the gentleman next to him, who was one of those wearing those big arir rings, disgusting olive colored suit, rishu, who had taken what looked like his 3 secretaries out to lunch, told him to come over and say, "Tell her she's not allowed to laugh." Right?
Wow.
So these things were not normal for me. Okay. It was like these markers of fascism were constantly hitting me in the face. Like, for instance, like my friend and cousin were like, "Let's go rafting cheese." Ramsar.
It's upstate in Shomal on the coast.
Yeah, I can't swim. I'm not going in the water fully clothed. Like these types of absurdities, I can't
Yeah.
handle. Right? Like I was like, I'm not going in this water. And like they're like, "Look how
Right.
pretty." I'm like, "Great. I want to swim."
Yeah.
And the other thing was the dressing. Like when I first saw my family, they were like, "چرا مثل دهاتی‌ها لباس پوشیدی?" Which
Right.
means
Why are you dressed like like
like
a villager, but
like a
like
villager, but also
not sophisticated?
yeah, because my hijab, I was covered. My mantle was where it was supposed to be.
Yeah.
And I remember saying to them, "Look, you want to make this thing pretty? I get it. To me, it's not pretty. It's an imposition. And so I'm going to fucking double down on that imposition. I'm not going to wear a Hermes scarf. Okay. I'm going to wear a rag on my head."
Right.
So, and I get it. They need to live with that. Right. So they were trying to do whatever they can to make it pretty, to make it bearable. I wasn't doing that. I was doing the opposite.
That's so interesting. Okay, so I think that's a big difference. Like, so is this trip is like what radicalized you, do you think? Or were you already?
I would say that this trip is what made me jarringly aware of what women deal with on a daily basis in Iran. I had
Gotcha.
read about it, I had seen it in newspapers, you know, but you don't really get it until a man that you don't even know comes up to you and says, "Hijab rayat kun," which is what happened to me in Esfahan, right? There
Which
was,
is or fix your hijab, like
yeah,
make yourself presentable.
exactly. Which at the time, my hair was not even an inch long when I went there. I had basically buzzed my head and gone there. But again, it was so, remember, it's Muharram too, right? So this guy in Isfahan felt really like emboldened. He like came up to me and said, "It's fine." And I tell you this, I'm going to swear, you can bleep it out. But I
No,
turned
no, no,
around and
bleeping.
I said to him, "Go fuck yourself, motherfucker." Like, And he said in perfect English, because my cousin basically had a heart attack when I said that to him. She was crying. Like, I looked at her and she was like, she said, "ببخشید اینا نمیفهمن اینا خارجیان," which basically means she doesn't know, she's
Yeah.
Western, she just arrived. He turned around in perfect English. This is a man who's in his 50s and said, "Cover your hair." Right? So, and again, like, I just thought, oh, I couldn't handle it. I wrote a letter to my mom and dad when I was in Iran. It was a 3-page letter, and I thanked them profusely for leaving.
Wow.
Because before that, I had these sort of exotic imaginations of like, I wish we didn't leave. What if we didn't go? I feel robbed of language. I feel robbed of culture. I feel, robbed of all these things. Like, people would come and go, and they'd be like, "Oh, it's so lovely there. It's so great. The food, the blah, blah, blah." And then I went there and I was like, I don't give a shit. Like, I don't care. None of this is important to me. Not the food, not the language. I can fix all that. You know, what I can't fix is freedom. And that to me was the most important thing. I could not handle, maybe because I wasn't brought up in that, right? But I could not handle it.
But I think there is a difference with like how you felt with like a lot of us, because I'll say for myself, for example, I so wanted to belong to this culture, and so I felt robbed also. And I think for me, I also went by myself in my 20s, and it was really hard to handle. But again, I saw, oh, okay, we just dissociate. We say this is not Iran, like Islamic Republic is not Iran. So I'm just dissociating. And so when I saw your clip that you post often with you and the two guys, and they're like, things are better now, things are fine. Because in 1999, they were better than they were 10 years before. Khatami was there. He was like making everyone feel like things could get better. And they were pushing this line of evolution, not revolution. We're standing up to the West, da da da. And I feel like for me, as someone who so badly wanted to be a part of this culture, I just thought, okay, I don't understand. We just need to live these two lives, and it's fine. It is fine. But you went and you said, "Hey, Emperor has no clothes. This is not fine. Like, look at what we're."
The other thing, Layla, is that I noticed, you know, this stark class differences. It was really jarring. And like, I had seen people that my mom hadn't seen in 20 years, right? So I was going around with some of her friends and my own family, who they had no outside life. Like, I sat my cousin down and I said, "You realize that you don't even have an outside life, right? Like, you go from your home into an agent, which is a taxi for hire. And then from there, you go to another party. Like, I was walking in Shadare. That was more interesting to me than being up in Tajrish and Zafiraniye and Fereshte and Elahiye and all these places where, these brats were running around. Like, there was nothing going on, which is exactly what you see now in Iran, right? It's that 2%, that 3% that are keeping this government in power. The only place that really didn't come out to protest during this woman life freedom movement was northern Tehran,
Ah.
right? Because their lives are fine. You have money, you can do whatever you want, right? And as long as you keep your mouth shut, the government doesn't come and bother you. But try going downtown, try going to the middle of the city, right? So my family could not believe that I was walking around downtown. They were like, "Why are you down there?" And I said, "Because that's your city. Your city is not just up here. Like, you don't know." They had no outdoor life, like, at all. And I was going to parties where I was like, "What is happening here? Like, you people are alcoholic drug addicts." Like, the amount of partying that people do to just sort of deaden themselves from the reality of where they're living. I don't begrudge them that. I get it. I don't have to live there. So you do whatever you need to do to survive. But, you know, don't tell me when you come back that it's heaven, because You actually don't do anything there. You have no dealings with the government. You don't go through the bureaucracy. You don't teach there. You don't work there. Like, you know, it's just at some point after I got back, I was like, that's it. I don't want to hear your shit anymore. Like, you don't even know what it's like, because you stay up in your little bubble in northern Tehran. And I did really think to myself, something has to give here. This can't be going on. And yeah, you're right. I guess that is the point where I was like, I think you used the term radicalized. Yeah, maybe that was the point that I was radicalized because I became starkly aware of what people were dealing with on a daily basis. People who actually function in society, you know?
And having to deal with the bureaucracy by yourself at 20, I think probably had a large part to do with that as well as all
Yeah,
these experiences
absolutely.
that
It
you're
wasn't
talking about.
something I could say, Dad, can you go get me my passport? Which I'm sure a lot of people do, right? You just like, I had to do it on my own. Or like, for instance, in Esfahan, I wanted to rent a hotel room. Guess what? I wasn't allowed because you're not
Wow,
allowed
yeah.
a hotel room as a single woman. Why? Because you're either a whore or a virgin. You pick one. Like the guy kept saying to me, he kept saying, "Do you have a note from your dad?" And I was said, "For what?" Like I want to rent a hotel room. And he said, "Are you a student? You need permission." And I said, "From who?" Like, these were things that I just couldn't get over because that's not how I was brought up. That's not the system I was brought up in, right? So it wasn't normal. Just not normal, And I use that with a capital N. Normal,
Right.
you know?
So what is it about? So you've had these views for a long time, and I feel like I said, a lot of people have been, going with this like evolution, it's getting better, and like realizing finally it's not getting better. What do you think it was about this Masa Amini uh, moment that happened that kind of got everyone on board with your point of view? What was the difference between everything that had happened before?
I think that a friend of mine spoke to her cousin in Iran, and this sort of really resonated with me. Is that what we see with the demographics of people who are participating in this revolution in Iran? These aren't just very progressive secular families. You have a lot of these kids who have died and who have been killed coming from very religious families whose mothers and fathers are actually very religious, whose mothers are wearing chadors. So it's a real mix of people. And I think what finally sort of broke the whatever what's that phrase, the
Camel's back.
camel's back, the straw that broke the camel's back, was that it is in that chant of Ma hame mahsa hastim, right? We are all potential mahsas. So if I was in Iran and when I turned around and I said to that guy, go F yourself, when he told me to cover my hair, I was lucky. I was lucky he didn't turn around and go and tell someone, right? I was lucky my cousin was with me and said, she's nuts. She's from the West, because who knows what would have happened to me. And I think a lot of parents realize that, right? Even the dad who thinks, nah, hijab is security for my daughter. It protects her against men, blah, blah, blah. Not realizing he himself is a man. So what does that say about him?
Right.
uh, I think a lot of dads realize, oh, it doesn't protect her because let's face it, Massa was covered up. Massa was properly veiled, right?
Right.
But that didn't help her still. So I think a lot of people came to realize that, and this whole facade of reform came crumbling down. I mean, not to say that people still don't believe in reform, but I think that whoever did at this point is really just not under that illusion anymore. You know, and I think that started to dissipate around 2009 also.
Yes. Yeah, in 2019 and
Exactly.
2023. It does seem like it's just getting shorter and shorter, these timelines.
And it's also generational. It's also generational. Sorry to interrupt you. Like this generation, Gen Z, is not burdened with the ideas of anti-colonialism, anti-West, all of that stuff that sort of fueled and built what we know as the monster of the Islamic Republic. They're not burdened with all of that, you know, stuff, isms,
Right.
you know.
Right. Well, shoot, we've reached our 1 o'clock time. That went by really fast.
I can go for another 15. Yeah.
Okay, good, good. Because I had so many questions about. I also want to hear about your project, about Bonu. If you can tell a little bit about that, about your restaurant, what you're doing with that right now. You're mostly at the CBC, or are you
I work
involved
at
in
the,
that as
yeah,
well?
I work at the CBC full time as a producer and a host. And I get to the restaurant as much as I can. So if they need help on the weekends, blah, blah, blah. But it's mainly my brother and sister who hold up the fort there.
Okay, so I think that especially in the last few months, like I've seen really the people who are involved with food have also been very involved with the revolution and talking about what's going on in Iran. Like, what do you think it is about food in particular? Like, why is that the channel through which you decided to do activism? What is it about
Yeah,
food?
I mean, it's not necessarily food based as it was to have some sort of cultural community hub. Um, you know, I love Iranian food. I think it's one of the best cuisines in the world. And I, all throughout graduate school, worked in other people's restaurants, and they were mostly French restaurants. And I would go to Iranian restaurants, I would eat, and it was always a situation where I would eat and want to run. It was never a place I wanted to hang out. The atmosphere was not nice. The music was horrible. And the food was okay, but it was not a place where I felt like I want to hang around, have a cocktail, invite, my non-Iranian friends. And so we wanted to open a restaurant that sort of everyone would come to, not just Iranians, right? And we did it in an area where there are no other Iranian restaurants. There were no Iranians even at that time, right? So again, it was sort of like going back to when my parents came here in 1979 and trying to forge a community. We did that with the restaurant down in downtown Toronto. And people were telling us, don't open in this area. You're not going to have customers, blah, blah, blah. But we wanted to go where we were told not to go. And that comes in with the whole, being told to go where you're not supposed to, doing things you're told not to. So we created a place where, Iranians of all stripes would feel comfortable, particularly the queer community. Like my brother and I are part of the LGBT community, and like we fly the rainbow flag there, right? Because we want Iranians who are not queer and have a problem with that. That sort of acts as a barrier for us right away, sort of sieve out the riffraff. If you're not comfortable here, we don't even want you here. And then Iranians who are queer to feel comfortable to bring their lovers, their boyfriends, their husbands, their wives, and their families, right? And so this April was 18 years. We're sort of very, very proud of the place that we've built, you know, and have seen couples come together, get married, then have the parents come on board and feel comfortable because they see other Iranians who are queer building something, right? Because at the end of the day, parents love their kids. We just have this culture of like, oh, baghiye chi migan. And when baghiye are okay with it, the parents are usually okay with it.
It's what will others say, Baghiye again.
Exactly, yeah.
And I noticed that you call it Iranian food, and a lot of Iranian restaurants call it Persian food. And even during COVID, you were kind of suggested to by the landlord to change that. So what brought you to that decision? Why is it
I mean,
Iranian
that
food?
was a decision we made very early on. And it really came back to, in a lot of ways, that hostage taking for my sister and I, because we experienced that. And we noticed that, you know, since coming to Canada, a lot of Iranians shied away from calling themselves Iranian. They said, well, I'm Persian, you know, and it was a way of distancing yourself from the actions of the government, right? And we thought, you know what, we're going to take this back from the Islamic Republic. We're going to take Iran back in our own way, and we're going to call it Iranian restaurant. And so we made sure to have that word in the restaurant title. And yes, Persian is a food, Persian is a culture, Persian is a language, but we wanted Iranian in the title of our restaurant name for that reason.
I do think for me that's been a big change in the past few months. Is I I think a lot of us wanted to not say negative things about Iran, or because we were thinking that was putting down the culture. But I think a big change has been realizing that it's Islamic Republic and Iran. Now saying it sounds so obvious, but it took until now for me to have that kind of language.
It's interesting you say that because this idea of aberu, which
Yeah,
how would you translate
uh, like pride, or your, yeah, pride, or your dignity, or
holding faith?
it's like not airing dirty laundry.
Exactly. I never had that problem. You see,
Right. I can
um,
see that. Yeah.
yeah, because I never gave in to this nefarious form of nationalism when it came to where I was from. So you mentioned that conversation that I had with those two gentlemen um, in that on that show, and they were doing such their best, to try and give Iran in a good light. At some point, I was going to say, do you two work for the tourism board of the Islamic Republic? But I never had that knee jerk reaction. When someone who was non Iranian would say to me, Iran is a fascist government, fascist regime, I would say, yes, absolutely they are. And they did this, this, and this. I wouldn't say, well, it's not that bad. It's a semi democracy. We have elections there, we elect things. And my favorite other statistic was, 56% of women go to university in Iran. And it's like, okay, but the employment is 8%. Like, people don't take it to its logical conclusion, right? They were so hell bent on not airing our dirty laundry to non Iranians because I'm sorry, at this point, what do you have pride in?
Right.
And I'm asking that of Iranians. What are you so proud of right now? No, you shouldn't have any pride in what's going on. You know, you should hold your head down, okay, and say, we're going to fix this. This
Right.
is on
I
us.
mean, I think for me, I'll answer that because I was like that. I had this knee jerk reaction to be like, it's not that bad. There's women authors, there's women. Da, da, da. I think for me, first of all, there was a lot of propaganda that was pushing us to be that way, right? I mean, there was just a lot of language around it, and also I think, um, I don't know, that yeah, it's hard to answer, but then I will ask you now, like, can we reconcile, like, for people like us, like, what now? What do we do to get past that? The dam is broken. We've realized our mistakes. Is there any reconciling it? Like, have you talked to those two guys? One of them went to jail for a really long time.
Yeah, he went to jail
One of
because
them, I mean, they were also victims.
he bit the hand that fed him. That's why he's in jail. And I won't name him because he could be a very litigious person. So we'll just leave his name
Okay.
out of this. Another one went on to work for the BBC. And, you can take that how you like. But
Here's what I was thinking. Sorry to go back to
he's a
that.
very
I think
changed person, that gentleman that went on to work for the BBC. I don't think the other one, I know for a fact, is still a son of a bitch. I'll call him
okay.
that, and I've called him that to his face. And so I'm not doing that behind his back. But the other person who I was on that panel with, I think from what I've seen is a very changed person now. So I think we can reconcile it. I think people can reconcile it by starting with themselves. Okay? How are you talking about what's going on in Iran right now at this moment? That is the biggest thing. Are you saying that, people don't, I mean, there are people still who say the majority of people believe in hijab. Well, what does that mean? Just because a lot of people believe in something doesn't make it right. The majority of Germans were on board with what Hitler was doing. Remember, the Nuremberg laws were voted in, right? So just because the majority believes in something doesn't mean it's right. And what is a democracy? A democracy is uh, protecting the minority from the majority. But that's not what you see, right? So we have to get out of this mentality of, ولی اکثریت مردم تو ایران اینو فکر کنن. So what? A government's role and responsibility is to be ahead of its people, to tell its people where we're going as a nation, what we're doing, to be ahead. Not, what do you guys think? Oh, you guys all think we should hang people? Great, let's do it. If I wanted to be
Right.
led by the masses,
Right.
that's dangerous. I don't want you to be my leader. As much as I love you, Layla, I need a bit more from you. You know, I want my
Right.
leaders to be a bit more educated than I am. You know, we have a
Absolutely.
president right now in Iran who's gone to grade 6 level of education.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I have a million other things I could talk to you about, but I think for now, can you tell us where people can find you, what you're working on right now? Of course, there's the Banu restaurant.
I'm actually working on a podcast about Syria. I'm not working on Iran in my actual job. I'm working on a podcast about. I'm not sure if people remember this, but it was called "The Gay Girl in Damascus." It was a hoax that an American man pretending to be a Syrian lesbian writing in Damascus during the Syrian Revolution. So it's a podcast about that. And it'll probably be coming out next year sometime. So I'm doing research and writing
Wow.
stuff on that right now. And the restaurant is still there, downtown Toronto on Queen Street West.
And of course, you're very active on Instagram, have
Yes,
great
of
information
course.
there. And and we'll link to your Instagram on this show notes, but can you spell out how people can find you on Instagram?
Oh, it's just at S Mohyeddin.
Which is Mohyeddin. But again, we'll link to all of that. And yeah, thank you so much for talking.
I mean, I could talk to you for hours. We didn't even talk on,
I know.
why it's Persian and not Farsi.
Oh yeah, let's talk about that. Sure, go ahead. Why is it Persian, not Farsi? We went through. It should be Iran. Or you have an Iranian restaurant. Why is Persian language different than that? Please tell everyone so we can end this debate once and for all.
It's very simple, very, very simple. You and I are speaking English right now, right? So
Yes.
when we're speaking English, the language is called Persian. It's not Farsi.
Is it because you hate Iranians? Is that why you're saying this?
No, it's because I love Persian and I love Iranians. And I don't want us to look foolish and use a term that is not actually correct. It's like saying Espanol instead of Spanish. It's like saying Deutsch instead of German.
Samira Jan, it is very simple. It is very simple. And there's just no other, but I don't know why, no matter what, people will yell about this.
Please, Iranian, I'm just going to do a quick PSA. For the love
Please.
of anything that you actually hold holy, stop when you're speaking English telling people the language is Farsi. It's Persian. There is not a single university in any world, any part of the world, that uses the term Farsi to teach Persian.
There we go. I think that'll end the debate. No one else is ever going to yell at me about it ever again.
I will die on this hill.
Well, thank you so much. Again, everyone, follow Samira on Instagram and see her updates. It's always informative, always wonderful. And watch her how to cut an Anar video. That's one of my favorites.
I could have talked to you for hours. Thank you.